Okay, so welcome to the grant lifecycle demonstration. My name is Angie Anderson. I've been a solutions engineer here at Smartsheet coming up on 5 years. But prior to Smartsheet, I worked at several nonprofits where I would aid in applying for grants. And I also worked at an association where all of the state education agencies were our members. While I was there, we provided consulting and technical assistance services, including helping states plan for their use of federal grant money. And as an organization, we were also primarily funded by grants ourselves. And so I would have loved a solution like this. When I was leaving, we had one Smartsheet license and we're just getting into it. And if I knew what I know now, man, the things would have been so much easier for my life. But back to today's solution. So when we think about grant management, some of the challenges that we hear from customers often are around information silos. Everything lives in different systems. Budget is one place, deliverables are another, progress tracking is another place. Everything is done manually. A lot of updates, a lot of email and copying and pasting. With that leads to data errors where things are sometimes, pasted incorrectly or typos. And just general collaboration is really challenging, especially if you are working with, outside consultants or contractors, or if you're the grantor and, working with grantees and trying to make sure that they're getting you the right updates and information, because both parties are going to have to report out on this at some point. And so that just becomes hard and there's no visibility. So it's really a challenge to, if you can't see the data, to know what course corrections or what updates or changes are needed. And so for today's solution, to help mitigate some of that, we're going to be looking at an end-to-end solution for grant applications and grant fulfillment. Many of you may already be doing some of this today, but we're really going to talk about the value of creating an end-to-end grant management solution in Smartsheet. Firstly, that is really going to be creating that visibility around these processes. That's going to ensure you're applying for grants that align with your agency or department mission and strategic plans, and that also, once awarded, grant deliverables are on track and making an impact in your communities. In other words, the goal is really doing what matters the most and connecting the dots between strategy and execution. So today, in that vein, we're going to be talking about target management. So identifying key grants worth pursuing. Automation. How can you drive process and reduce risk at the same time by automating a lot of these manual tasks that are done today? Grant execution. Instantly collaborate on new grants once awarded, and reporting and visibility, being able to see the data that matters so that you can make some of those course corrections, and reporting out is a lot easier and isn't taking up all of your time. And so part of that, before we dive in, is looking at the structure of the solution, just to give you a context of where we're going today. I know this is small, I promise I will zoom in. But here in this bottom lane, this is our application lane. This can be used for both applying for your own grants, or if you're managing the application process of, some of your sub-grants. This middle lane is going to be grant fulfillment. So once a grant is awarded, how do we manage that? And then portfolio is that aggregate reporting. So if I zoom in, go the other way. Whether you're applying for a grant or managing your own applications for grants you're awarding yourselves, there needs to be an easy way to track all of that, to understand a review process for the grants you receive or the applications you're receiving, and also track, deadlines, due dates for those grants that you may be applying for, some of those, competitive or categorical grants. So if you do decide to apply, it's really easy to have, we call this a toolkit spun up, where I am instantly going to know the due dates. I'm going to have a dashboard to keep me on track. I'm going to be able to have an estimate sheet to help understand kind of what we're proposing with this budget. That is going to lead us up to this portfolio level, where at a whole, we can see both the review process for applications, but also our application pipeline for grants we may be applying to. So really creating some high-level metrics and that visibility we talked about. And then once a grant is awarded, we're going to see this line from grant application and this automation up to fulfillment, meaning we're again eliminating a place where there's a chance for copying and paste or data errors or typos. We already have the data in our system, so why should we have to type that in twice? We're going to walk through how we can automate that process and drive some efficiencies. And then once, we've received the fulfillment information and we've double checked everything and made sure we have all of our I's dotted and T's crossed, creating that toolkit so that everything is in a centralized location, so that it is easy for our team members to go and make updates, that we can either collect deliverable updates from our grantees, or we can report out on our own deliverables. And because it's in this connected environment, we're going to have this portfolio reporting that is just automated. This is going to be, extremely easy and very little lift because you're already doing this. The system is already doing this for you. So let's dive in and go into Smartsheet. So here's our roadmap. Like I mentioned, we're going to start out with this target management, identifying key grants worth pursuing and really drive strategic alignment. So that initial intake application process. Here I'm looking at a fairly typical what we call demand intake dashboard. And this is where you can really start to streamline incoming applications, either again for your own applications or managing the subgrant application process. And this is where consistency is really going to be your friend and drive a lot of efficiency. You can make sure you're capturing all of the right information at the right time, so that you're not going back and forth and, things aren't formatted differently. You can use conditional logic in forms. So if I pick, it's an education grant, now there's different fields that populate versus if it's a, transportation grant, then there might be other fields. So that you're always collecting the right data, and you don't have to copy and paste. That's going to feed directly into a sheet. And actually, at the height of COVID, I was working with the Washington State Department of Health, and we quickly helped them set up a solution to manage all of their small business loan applications. And so I think in the first 5 minutes, we got about 2,500 applicants, which was crazy. But all of that to say, Smartsheet can handle that type of load if that should happen. If you think about even, disaster relief and collecting grant information, FEMA or something like that, or volunteer onboarding, being able to use a form for large populations, you can embed this form straight into your website. So as people go to your website, they fill out the form, that's going to land directly into your intake sheet. And then over here on the right, I'm using a report, and it's grouped by everything that I myself have submitted or requested. But what this does is provides visibility into, again, my previously submitted requests so that I can create some transparency. I can reduce status inquiries. I'm not emailing people like, what's the status of this? I have everything I need right here to be able to get some answers. We've created a self-service portal that is going to reduce admin burden on your folks reviewing grant applications or submitting them themselves. And this is also another place where we could use that dynamic view that Erica just showed. You could use the dynamic view instead of a report as well, if you did want people to have access to that underlying sheet. And then we've got high-level metrics. Because it's all in Smartsheet, we can create some of that additional visibility because everything is standardized. So we are looking at apples to apples. So let's look at that intake sheet. We filled out the form. Everything is going to land in this sheet. There's a lot of great information here, but it can be overwhelming, especially, depending on the volume of requests you're getting. So right now I'm looking at this in grid view. I could just as easily switch this to Gantt view to have more of a timeline view. I can also look at this in card view, where now I can, really quickly get these high level totals to understand what's in our pipeline, what's awaiting submittals or approvals, what's already been won and needs a toolkit created for. If I wanted to look at this by status, so we're looking at this by status, sorry. If I wanted to look at this by application lead, I can now understand my team's bandwidth. So it's a little bit easier for me to, drag and drop if some of these folks, like, we need to distribute the workload a little bit. And then, right, you could add a prioritization scale to this as well, if that's something that you need to do to make some of those internal meetings or review meetings a little bit more meaningful, but really easy and quick to make changes on the fly. So let's go back to our grid view. And while we're looking at this, it can be, like I mentioned before, helpful to look at, grants by distribution or by funders, or, making sure that we're applying for the right things. With a sheet like this, you could figure that out, but it can take a minute to synthesize everything and actually, glean what information you need to. Instead, we can use Smartsheet to create a dashboard. This is just a visual representation of that sheet. So at a quick level, I can see, again, what's in our pipeline, what needs review. And there may be different metrics on whether you are collecting applications versus whether you're submitting your own applications, but that's totally fine. This is just to give you an idea of what's possible. You may, switch, these are all customizable. So there may be a different way that you want to look at this, and that's totally fine. If we keep going, we can see again, what's that award status? So, are we losing more than we're winning? Do we need to think about, are we missing deadlines? Being able to take that data and turn it into a report so that you're really creating a curated view for your audience, depending on, what they care about. Like I mentioned, kind of that example before, maybe you are submitting your own applications. You're going out and trying to get your own funding. If you've decided, hey, this is a grant that we want to apply for, you can open it up and have a toolkit created so that for every grant you're applying for, you're now going to get an application plan so that you don't ever miss those due dates, that things don't fall through the cracks. You can start to plan your budget. You can create, again, this centralized location where everything you need for this application to be successful is all going to be right here. So let's go back to our roadmap. We've seen how to leverage consistent process to focus on what matters the most. That is going to bring us down to automations. So we've found a grant we wanted to apply for, we've submitted the form, we've applied for it, but now let's take a look at automations to see what an approval process could look like and other ways to eliminate some of that manual work and really drive efficiencies. So if we go back to our intake sheet, I want to highlight here the automations panel. So one, Smartsheet is low code, no code. So you do not need to be an expert to set up automations. A great one is requesting an update. So if you're working with outside contractors and you need updates, every week on a specific deliverable, you can have this set up, or when a specific criteria is met. I see customers use this a lot for every time a task turns yellow, provide an update so that we can get ahead of it before it actually becomes red. I saw one of the questions, apologies, I can't remember if this was in Erica or Amy's demo, but about Teams integration. We can integrate with Teams so that every time an alert is sent, that Teams channel is notified, or you can create a Teams channel specifically for each individual grant. If people are already working in these places and it's going well, we don't want to disrupt that and create, unnecessary bottlenecks. Let's keep people working where they're already being successful and build on that. So people can interact with Smartsheet straight from Teams. If you're working with, a lot of budget issues, You can generate documents to integrate with DocuSign. So there's a lot of options. Again, we'll talk specifically about this approval, but being able to alert someone when a new application comes in and it needs to be reviewed. You can really use this to create that alignment between grantee and grant requirements when reviewing applications to make sure all parties are aware of what's going on and nothing is dropped through the cracks. So in this example, let's pretend that this isn't submitted, that we filled out the form and it's brand new. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. And what that's going to do while it's saving is kick off a process for an alert to me to let me know I need to approve, is this a grant that we want to actually apply for? And so, sorry for the scrolling. Here we've got our approver column. All Smartsheets have different column types. This is a contact list column, meaning while it shows my name, it's actually associated with my email address. So anytime an automation kicks off, it's going to go straight to me. It's also going to go to my email. It's also going to go to Teams if we have it set up there. And so you'll see if I open up my email, we've just got a new one. I can open this up. There we go. Open up this request. We can see, high level information. So I don't even actually need to go in the sheet to know, is this something that we should be approving or not? I can open this up. So this is great too. If you've got, leadership who's constantly in meetings or on the road, they can do it straight from their phone. I can click approve. That is then going to automatically be reflected in our intake sheet. And it will also capture that approval response. So again, that dashboard, the application dashboard we looked at is going to be the metrics will update as changes are made in the sheet. So let's refresh this and we'll see that change reflected here in the sheet. And might need to give it a minute. My internet has been slow today, so apologies for that. But that's kind of how that approval process works and those benefits of being able to make approvals anywhere that you need to. The other one I wanted to mention is we talked about eliminating the need for manual entry. So one of the other automations we already have set up is this copy row. So anytime a grant has been awarded, we want that to move to our fulfillment intake sheet because we want to kick off that fulfillment toolkit. So we're no longer in the application process, we're in that fulfillment process. And so we need another toolkit, another sheet to make sure that happens. But like I mentioned, we already have everything in Smartsheet. So we shouldn't need to duplicate that entry. So what this automation does is once it is awarded, it's going to automatically move to the intake sheet. So if I change this to awarded and save, and you can also set up other automations like change cell. So if you're not a formula person, that's totally fine. We can use a change cell automation that once this changes to awarded, go ahead and collect the date. So that again, if you're looking for that kind of historical or audit information, you're always going to have what you need. You're going to know what the changes were, who made the changes, when were those changes made. So you can always go back and get any of your questions answered at any given time. So we'll refresh this, but I do have the intake sheet open. And once that comes in, it will come in at the bottom of the sheet, but I already have it set up so that we can kind of see what that toolkit looks like. But as it comes in, you can see all of this is pulling straight from that previous intake sheet. It's all the exact same information. We can see that it's definitely been awarded. Anything on this sheet should be awarded. And then we can set up another review process or approval process to say, hey, before we kick off that toolkit and all of this data is pushed to each of those assets, avoiding duplicating, entry, do we have everything correct? If it is, we can again set up that approval, and now we're going to kick off that toolkit. And so I'm going to pause before we kind of look at the execution of that, just at a high level reviewing how you can leverage the Smartsheet automations to really save time by reducing that manual effort and informing the right people at the right time. So this approach is really going to ensure we're eliminating as many opportunities for typos or, again, anything falling through the cracks, and everyone is aware and on the same page. So, like I mentioned, let's move into that execution portion. How can you instantly collaborate on these new grants to really make sure you're able to take action on critical needs and keep all of those deliverables on schedule? We've achieved some consistency in the grant reporting by standardizing this process and automating the flow of data. And so again, all of that approved intake data is now going to push to our assets. So all of this information we didn't have to type in. Every time there's a new grant that we need to track, we don't have to type any of this in. Smartsheet and Control Center will do that for you. The other thing too is you can see we've got everything here that we may need for this grant to be successful. We've created kind of a centralized portal where we've got everything we need. We don't have to spend time searching for it. We don't have to kind of worry where things live and everything is siloed and disjointed. It's all going to be right here. So through this portal, it's also really easy to ensure real-time view of the progress across the grant. So we can see, anytime there's a change made in that schedule, it's going to be reflected on this dashboard, and you can keep everything in one place. We can see, if we needed to submit budget information or have budget information available, we can use that same tool that Amy demonstrated, Data Shuttle, to have the budget information updated and all in one place. And so I'm going to open up the schedule. All of these are clickable. I just have the tabs already open. But as we can see here, within the schedule, I can see this paperclip icon. So I know there's an attachment for this row. So again, when we think about that centralization, everything I need is here. And what's nice is this 32 and the paperclip on this row tells me that this attachment is related to this task specifically. However, for things like maybe a narrative or a chart or something like that, it's not going to be relevant to a specific row, but to the entire grant itself. And so you can also attach things to this sheet as a whole, not just a specific row. And you can upload straight from your own desktop, but you can also have links to any of these places. So again, you're all working from the same place, the same source of truth, and we're not creating duplicate versions. Multiple people can be in the sheet, and everyone's going to have the most up-to-date, accurate data. The other easy thing here to collaborate and make it easy to work across teams or even across internal and external folks is conversations. So I can mention folks. I can say, at John, what's the status? And just like we kind of saw in that automation section, John can get notified in his email. He can get notified in Smartsheet. It can also go directly to Teams or Slack. And regardless of where he responds in any of those 4 places, it will all still be tracked here. So I know in a previous life, I would do, have an email thread of updates and have 5 different versions of Excel sheets and trying to figure out how to either update the Excel or add some of those email threads as comments, but no one ever read the comments in Excel sheets. And it just gets messy really quickly. So this is an easy way to avoid all of that. The other thing with conversations is you have this tool called Latest Comment. So here I can see there's several comments. I may not want to go into this conversations panel every time to figure out what's the most recent update. The latest comment is going to show us every time there's a new comment, say Thanks for the update. Anytime there's a new comment, this column is going to take that and update it. So just looking at the sheet, we'll be able to know what exactly is happening at any given time. So I click refresh and wait for it to refresh, and we can see that that has been updated there. So just an easy way to keep track of everything. And so again, being able to streamline any of your processes, whether it's qualitative or quantitative, specifically, I do want to mention kind of that budgeting piece where you can use the form if you don't want people to have access, to the sheet. Maybe they need to submit addendums or updates to the budget. But also, I know from previous experience, a lot of grantors will have their own preferred format for submitting financial updates and reports. So just like with the tool Amy showed, you can not only import data into Smartsheet, you can use that tool to export. So you can create that mapping and have it exported to a CSV that's already set up in that, funder's preferred reporting format, and have all of the data match. So you're not copying and pasting. I know previous to Smartsheet, hopefully, usually, someone would send out calendar invites of when certain deliverables or reports were due. But inevitably, you are focused on the work, and even though you know the due date is coming up, it's almost impossible just to get everything done to be able to start compiling all of that. And even if by some miracle you did get the financial reporting done, a director or someone would still be working on a PowerPoint at the 11th hour, in which case I'd get an email at 8 or 9 at night saying, I need this final chart, or I need this, please, do a final once over of this before it's submitted at 9 a.m. the next morning. So you're constantly working around the clock, especially during due dates and deliverables, because you just don't have time or bandwidth to do anything else except for operate in that kind of chaos way. By having everything in Smartsheet where you make an update in that schedule, that's reflected on the dashboard, that's reflected in your portfolio, which we'll get to. Even if I don't have time to, start compiling everything for reporting due dates, that's fine because everything is actually already updating. There shouldn't be anything that I am not already capturing and isn't updating for me. Smartsheet is going to do all of that for you. And so with that, we've kind of walked through how you can leverage both Control Center, creating and automating the generation of that fulfillment toolkit, but also core Smartsheet and dashboards to be able to collaborate on new grants. The grant dashboard creates a centralized location for all relevant materials, allowing your team to take action on critical needs and keep those schedules on track. So really, again, this is going to ensure everyone's on the same page and knows what is expected of them. And then that leads us to the really fun part, the portfolio reporting. And so being able to, as we're making updates in each of our individual grant fulfillment toolkits, that is going to affect that portfolio reporting. So let's look at an example of that. Right now, we're looking at, again, a portfolio dashboard that provides real-time visibility across all of our active grants. So I can see a breakdown of the type of grants or, what initiatives they're funding. Again, this is all customizable. You could certainly, certainly change this to meet your own needs. These are just examples, but at a high level, it's really easy to understand what's happening. This, as part of a leadership team, this allows me to gain visibility into some of the risks, and help to make sure that we can take action before things have a bigger impact. So because everything's automatically rolling up and we're not duplicating data entry, I can trust that what I'm seeing here is accurate because we have minimized that risk of human error and eliminated the need for someone to add new grants or make updates on an ongoing basis. So if I wanted to drill down and kind of why are these grants red or what's going on here, Again, we talk about self-service and easy to use. I can click on this report where right now we're looking at all of our grants by status, but I could just as easily change this to look at by health. If I can spell, there we go. And 2 clicks, the data resorts, and now I can quickly understand what's going on, high-level information about each of these grants, and do I need to drill down? Do I need to click into their individual dashboards and go even deeper to figure out what's happening here? And so then also I can use this dashboard to quickly see what conversations I need to have with other leaders. So for example, if I'm looking at this, I can see, grants aligned with public safety are further along in their budget than they should be. So this can prompt me to talk to leaders assigned to those grants. I can quickly see Kieran is leading this. I can also click on that dashboard specifically for public safety grants. And now I can start to get a complete picture for what is happening specifically with this subsection of grants. And, do we need to get ahead of things? How do we make sure that things that are teetering don't have a greater negative impact than they should? And then another key advantage, if I keep scrolling, is being able to map everything to the calendar. So here I've got a report that is showing me all deliverables across all of our grants. So I can see when these due dates are coming up towards a timeline. And I can also have that kind of different visibility mapped of, for specific grants, what's not started, but is coming up and I need to get ahead of, or what can I take off my plate or rearrange, or, maybe we need to ask for an extension. So I know, in my previous life, I would spend so much time color coding my calendar and trying to figure out when things would become due. And inevitably, someone would get an email about a change in a due date, and not on purpose, but would forget to share that information with the rest of the class. And so now we're all operating on different schedules, and there's a fire drill because the due date is sooner and we didn't know about it. And now everyone's scrambling. With Smartsheet, having everything in this connected environment, you can, as one person makes a change, that's reflected everywhere. So you're always going to be operating under the same assumptions with the same data that you can trust and is accurate. So we can also look at a budget dashboard to kind of, again, see this type of portfolio visibility, but from a budget standpoint and thinking about long-term planning. It's really important to understand, again, that pipeline to see what do we have incoming, but also what's active, or is there a category that's not performing well that we need to take a look at? So we can also look at, some of these breakdowns by distribution. We can look at funding by actual versus proposed, so that we can be really realistic about what else can we take on? What other, departments are being impacted by this pipeline? And so as a portfolio leader, this can really help me feel good about what projects we're taking on, or what, grants we're working on. That can also help us inform making, do we need to, apply for different grants, or seek more funding so that we can get more applicants to have a greater impact. But again, having this visibility is really going to allow you to make an impact and to make your data actionable. So it's not just that everything's here, it's what can you do with this data? And then the last piece here that I want to touch on when we think about scale and growth is global updates. So with Control Center, again, we've spun up our toolkit, and that toolkit for grant fulfillment is going to automatically be connected to our portfolio. But what happens if there's a different metric that we haven't been capturing that we need to? Global updates is going to allow you to push those changes into not only that toolkit blueprint so that all future projects are now capturing that metric, but it's also going to push out that change to all active projects. So if, for example, you've got 100 active grants, and there's a new metric you want to capture, that means that you have to update the sheet because you need a column to capture that data in the first place. You're most likely going to need to update a report to have that column added and included in the report. And you're also going to need to update the dashboard, at least one, maybe two, to have that metric reflected and visible. So that's 3 different places at a minimum times 100 grants. That's 300 places you need to make an update. It's certainly doable. Smartsheet's no-code platform. It's not incredibly difficult, but it is extremely time-consuming. And so global updates is going to allow you to make those changes very quickly, very efficiently, so that as you evolve and your processes evolve, this solution is going to grow with you and not get stale and sit on the shelf. So we go back to our roadmap here. What we've seen is how you can really use these dashboards to create portfolio visibility and create meaningful reporting that's going to allow you to stay on top of key dates across your entire grant management system, and then use that data to drive strategic decisions. So if we go back to our PowerPoint, and just to recap kind of some of those challenges that we listed in the beginning, information silos, manual processes, data errors, collaboration, visibility, Smartsheet is really going to create that single source of truth. It's going to create a centralized location where everyone's working from the same page and under the same assumptions. It's going to be really easy to provide that visibility both internally and externally, because with Smartsheet, you can embed dashboards, you can share information really easily, and you can set up those automations so that you're both always collecting the right data, but you're also pushing out the right data, and everyone has what they need to be successful and make sure your grants are delivered on time with an impact positively affecting your communities. And so with that, I will stop sharing and pause for questions.
Perfect. Angie, thank you so much for that. There were a few patterns, so I'll give you a kind of multi-part question here. Passing to you, since you know this solution inside and out, and I think your commentary is a little bit better than my thoughts here. A lot of folks were asking the template sets that inspired the solution that you showed. So if you could take a moment to explain where you began and sort of how you built it out, just in sort of layman's terms there. And then importantly, a few questions on how Control Center factored into that. Feel free to reshare your screen if any of those visuals would help, but essentially going from where they can start to some of the things that led to what you showed here.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me get out of this and I'll get to the Lucid. Oops. There we go. And I'll scroll out. Oops. So first, in terms of kind of what template sets I thought of when creating this, was, and this was not my creation by any means, this was a group effort. But part of it was the PMO template set, Project Management Office. That is one that is going to most likely simulate a control center scenario where you have a project toolkit and also a portfolio reporting capability. And so that's kind of a baby step into Control Center. It's a manual way to replicate some of this. And then the other parts are a little bit contract management, that use case, that template set in there. But a lot of it really is just conversations with customers, seeing what their requirements are. I worked recently with University of Alabama, their Water Institute. They're receiving federal funding, but then also managing the application for sub-grants, and they have a multi-step approval process for their grantees. And then my own experience having worked with state education agencies and kind of helping them with allocating funds and seeing what some of those reporting requirements are. And then also having pretty much my entire career prior to Smartsheet worked in a place that is always funded by grants. And so being acutely aware of my salary is tied to grants. And so being able to understand the reporting requirements, both the narrative and the impact, but then also the budget piece, because that is ultimately, what's gonna drive future budget as well. So I don't know if that answers that question. I'm happy to clarify if people want to put more questions in the Q&A. And then in terms of where Control Center comes in, one is probably more relevant if you are applying for your own grants versus if you're doling out sub-grants and acting as the grantor. But the first one, if you are applying for grants, is that application toolkit. So anytime you've identified that there is a grant that you want to apply for, creating a very simple toolkit compared to the fulfillment one anyway, of here's our schedule that's going to track all of our due dates. So that means that we need to have our LOI in by this date. That means that we need to have, a budget plan by this date. And that means that we're going to have some internal meetings and approvals to create kind of what we want this grant to be. So creating some visibility and structure around the application process. And then the other way that's probably a little bit more applicable to a wider audience is the fulfillment toolkit. So once a grant has been awarded, and this can be used both for if you are receiving funds and managing your own grants, but also you could create this and share it with your grantees. If you want them to use this format to provide updates, you could absolutely do that, where for every grant or sub-grant, you are going to have a dashboard that's going to have those key metrics. And so what Control Center does is it automates that process. When we've got our intake sheet, let's see, here we go. When we've got our intake sheet, basically Control Center is going to say, okay, great, this is approved, this is ready to launch. For each one of these, I want this toolkit created automatically, and it's going to pull the data from that intake sheet and automatically parse it out to each one of these so that I don't have to retype the grant name in 10 different places. Control Center is going to do that for me. So we not only are automating the process and creating, some speed and efficiency, we're also eliminating that human/manual element of potential typos so that it is always going to be accurate. There's not an extra zero added when there shouldn't be, things like that. Did those answer those questions?
Yes, thank you, Angie. We'll see from the audience if there's a bit more to hear there. I wanted to answer a question that came in much earlier. We saw a lot of examples from Angie about icons and navigation. And obviously, as she mentioned, she had multiple tabs open across the top, but she was drilling in and out of various dashboards as she went. Someone had a great question of, can you have a dashboard with different pages and a menu bar? A lot of folks have done that sort of thing. We actually have a specific capability that brings those pages together. I don't believe we've included that in any part of today's demonstration, but wanted to comment that if you'd like to have multiple pages, all of them dashboards, and you're navigating them, very often we're bringing that together in a work app. That is a feature that if it's available to you, you're going to see it on that left-hand rail. Looks sort of like 4 diamonds. It's a way of assembling and disseminating a Smartsheet solution in that more app-like fashion, not just mobile optimized, but that's sort of all in one place. Your permissions are in one place. Go through it. It's a little bit older and a little tougher to maintain if you're just doing all the icons in the dashboard. We certainly do it when it's simple and suits our needs, but odds are, Lisa, you're going to be the most interested in something in the form of work apps with a series of dashboards. Other than that, Tim and I have just been going through and answering the more specific or unique questions to the best of our ability. Not sure if any of them have stood out. We can wait a few more moments, see if anything's going to come in from the rest of the group before moving on.
I do want to, I'll quickly point out that at the end of the showcase, there will be a QR slide that will take you to a survey for feedback, but there will also be a question to ask for contact from your account team. So if you have questions, if you're looking for, how do I take this to the next step? Who do I get in contact with? That'll be a really easy way to get that started.
And then I think Tim already put this in the chat, but if you are monitoring any of the Q&A, that question around template sets, Tim had put in a couple links to some older ones that were initially created for higher ed grant management, but very similar process, and definitely applicable, as well as that contract and vendor management one that that we mentioned as well. Okay,